quick, jump scare. Ooh, options. Ooh. Hello, everybody. I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and I'm still sick as a dog, so let's talk about a game I keep finding myself going back to in the last few days, and that is Path of Exile 2. For you see, Path of Exile has always been known for its extremely in-depth skill tree, and for a lot of new players, it can be really off-putting simply because of how big and girthy this skill tree is. And look, it definitely leaves a lasting first impression, but I don't think it's necessarily that big or intimidating or anything like that. It just requires a bit of understanding. And diving into Path of Exile 2, I found myself really enjoying the new passive skill tree. And I'm not a PoE 1 player or anything like that. I tried dipping my toe in the PoE 1, but it never really stuck with me, but it wasn't because of the skill tree. You see, years ago, I played a game called Final Fantasy X, and in that game, it has a skill tree similar to Path of Exile called the Sphere Grid. So I've been down this road and seen this circus before, and I think the passive skill tree in Path of Exile, and especially Path of Exile 2, is particularly interesting, and I want to go into why I find it interesting and why I like it. So let's mull over the Path of Exile 2 skill tree. So it looks really big, right? Understandably so. A bit intimidating, because for a lot of people, especially in a game like Path of Exile, you always have that fear that you may go down the wrong path and go in a suboptimal way, as opposed to what is the meta. And then you have the fear that you may brick your character. Granted, I haven't gotten that far into PoE 2 yet, but I think in a lot of ways, the PoE 2 skill tree is rather intuitive. You are not intended to get every point on this skill tree, at least I think. The idea is that for each of the starting classes, you start at a different point on that skill tree. Everyone shares the exact same skill tree here. It's just the starting position, like the Sphere Grid back in FF10, will change depending upon what class you pick. And when you zoom out and view the tree in its entirety, you may go, well, where the hell am I supposed to go with this? But if you zoom in on the starting choices you actually get, I tend to find the decisions to be rather rudimentary, and kinda basic. And not in a bad way either. For instance, I play a warrior in Path of Exile 2, and I kinda had three main branching paths at the start when it came to my skill tree. I could either go for more just raw damage, more stun buildup, or I could go for more armor/defense. Naturally, I went with more damage because I'm having a giant hammer right now, I want to bash things over the head with it. But I think that choice right there is really intuitive depending upon what kind of build you're going to want at the end of Path of Exile 2, or even throughout your journey through the various acts. If you want a more defensive playstyle, you may go and elicit for more defensive-oriented passive bonuses. Likewise, maybe if you want to manage various fights, you may go for more stun, or if you just want more raw damage, which has been kind of working for me, you just go down the damage route. And then you have more of these like branching paths the further you go down any one of these paths. And if you want to go back and pick up some other nodes from the other paths, you're at liberty to do that. And I know the game also does technically allow you to refund some points, I believe, for gold. I haven't done that yet, so I can't speak to the conversion values or anything like that, but it's not like these are necessarily set in stone, and if you want to retool a little bit, you're allowed to. For me, one of the abilities that became a staple for me was an ability called Infernal Cry. For Warrior, it's classified as a war cry, and basically allows me to explode enemies when I kill them. It's really cool. And in AoE situations where I can be easily overrun, it's become a life saver for me. And going down the passive skill tree, I eventually stumbled myself upon a separate branch, like a little mini branch, that gave me a bunch of bonuses for my war cries. And since that was one of the big mainstays of my build and my playstyle, I decided to get those points. There was also another branching path. Do I want to really specialize in one-handed weapons or two-handed weapons? And this is what I found the passive skill tree to be composed of, primarily speaking. As you go down it, you are presented with a bunch of these choices that allow you to lean into whatever build you really want and to capitalize on that style of build. Nothing has been overly complicated, and I haven't felt the actual need to look up a build guide. I'm sure if I want to min-max the endgame, that's when that would come into play. I can look up a build all I want. But right now, at least, in Path of Exile 2's early access, where we don't have access to everything, like as a warrior, if I want a two-handed weapon, I'm kind of locked to, say, two-handed maces. at least for the most part. And in this period where people are still stumbling around and trying to get the lay of the land, experimentation can often thrive. And I think that while yes, on like an initial glance at the skill tree in Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2, it can be really intimidating to a lot of new players, I think if you allow yourself to just take it piecemeal and take it a small chunk at a time, it can present some interesting progression options. And if you want to look ahead at some of the passive skills you can find later down the tree, which is what I've been doing as well, you can look at something and go, hey, that looks really cool, I eventually want to work my way over to that. And that's pretty much what you can do. And I don't know how viable it is right now, but I do like the idea that all of these skill trees are interconnected. Well, I say skill trees, it's that the skill tree is shared by all these classes. Because if some talents that normally are served for a different class may benefit whatever build I'm running on a different class, I like the fact I can eventually know that I can work my way towards that and pick up those points. May not come immediately, but at some point I may have access to them. Though if it's on the opposite end of the skill tree, I can't imagine it'd be worth it. But again, I like that I have some flexibility in that regard. I also appreciate how each of these points you pick up don't particularly feel small or minor. In a lot of skill trees I find in RPGs, it is very easy for them to be like 1 or 2% stat increases. You don't normally really feel that on a point-by-point basis, and it can be rather boring to pick up those. But in PoE 2, most of the points I've picked up are like 12% extra physical damage, 12% extra damage with two-handed weapons. He's like 30% recovery time with a war cry, on top of a big chunk of damage. So it allows me to really pile on the damage, and because you level up pretty regularly, it's a good feeling to be rewarded on an often basis by skills that you know, because they're not just like chump change, will add up quickly. Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 is predicated on its build variety and progression system, so having a skill tree that is like that exemplifies that mentality. It gives you a ton of options and a ton of different ways to go depending upon what you want to specialize in, what you prefer, and what you enjoy. I picked up those Warcry abilities because that is a staple of how I play and interface with Path of Exile 2, but if that wasn't one of your core abilities that you like to use all the time, you can just skip it and spend those passive points somewhere else. I think a big benefit of the skill tree in PoE 2 is how intuitive it appears on first impression when you actually zoom in on the choices you have available to you with spending your first point. More often than not, it's like, do you want to go left, middle, or right? And at this point, I haven't felt the need to look up a guide or look up a build to properly judge where I need to go. At some point, I probably will, when you get deep into the end game on like a new character or something like that, but on my initial jaunt into PoE 2, I haven't felt that need or inclination because the tree comes off as intuitive. For a tree as big as PoE 2's, that is a hard thing to accomplish, but I think they've managed to roughly thread that needle. And when paired alongside all the other customization that PoE 2 has, and all the other progression, like ascendancies and gear and all that, that is a hard thing to manage. But I think when you give the skill tree enough time, which I don't think it requires much, and you're willing to try and understand it, I think it can easily go from something that seems too big and off-putting to something that you yourself may want to embrace if you like this customization angle PoE has, and is known for. Do I think PoE 2 is a perfect game? No. No game is, though. But I think in a lot of ways, it's getting right what it needs to get right. And I personally don't view the skill tree to be a negative or a con. I think it is something that PoE should embrace, and it has. It can be overwhelming, as we've talked about before, because of just how big and girthy it is, but when you take your time and view it on a piece-by-piece basis, I think there's a lot of charm to it. And with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day. I'll see you all next time. Leave a comment down below, by the way, with what your favorite class in PoE 2 has been so far. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.